In May 1944, an eerie silence swept over the Japanese Imperial Navy's communication lines. One by one, Admiral Suimu Toyoda's strategically placed submarines' crucial surveillance network in the Pacific stopped transmitting. First it was Row 106, then Row 104, and Row 116. In less than a week, 5 submarines had disappeared, leaving Row 105 as one of Toyoda's final hopes to execute a plan to entrap the American fleet. Alarming reports of the missing submarines reached Tokyo, prompting Imperial headquarters to issue urgent warnings to the remaining vessels. Something unprecedented in naval warfare was unfolding. A strange new weapon was on the prowl, and an enigmatic American ship appeared to be operating alone to carry it out. After months of training at various mainland ports, Ensign John C. England had just arrived in Hawaii, prepared to serve in the United States Navy. Before sunrise, he reported for duty in the radio room of the USS Oklahoma, docked at Battleship Row in Pearl Harbor. It was December 7, 1941. Unlike England, the USS Oklahoma was a battle-hardened vessel. Commissioned during World War I, it had once protected Allied convoys in the Atlantic, and later helped evacuate American citizens and refugees during the Spanish Civil War. But none of that history mattered as the sun rose over Oahu, and shapes began to emerge in the sky. The distant drone of aircraft engines grew louder and more ominous by the second. Suddenly, without warning, hundreds of Japanese planes descended upon the harbor. At approximately 7:50 a.m., the Oklahoma was struck by the first of several torpedoes. In the radio room, England struggled to maintain his footing as the ship shook violently. Within minutes, 3 torpedoes had hit the vessel. The hull twisted, and the ship began to roll over at an alarming angle. Orders to abandon ship were issued. England, like the rest of the crew, was expected to evacuate, but instead, he made a fateful decision. He defied orders and plunged deeper into the rapidly flooding corridors to help his trapped shipmates. He managed to rescue sailors on 3 separate runs, guiding them to safety. But during his 4th attempt, as the Oklahoma continued to capsize, he was unable to escape. Outside, enemy aircraft strafed the waters, tearing through lifeboats and survivors. The Oklahoma, struck by as many as 8 torpedoes, capsized within 12 minutes, leaving only her starboard keel visible above the water. That morning, 429 sailors perished aboard the Oklahoma, including Ensign John C. England. The following day, President Franklin D. Roosevelt addressed the American people. Despite the nation's attempts to stay out of the war, this attack had drawn the United States into a conflict it could no longer ignore. For the country, this war had become personal. By 1944, the Japanese Navy, battered and exhausted, faced a formidable American military that not only matched its strength but had now surpassed it. The United States was producing aircraft carriers, planes, and expertly trained pilots at a rate Japan couldn't compete with. Still, Japan wasn't ready to accept defeat. In a final effort to reclaim dominance in the Pacific, Admiral Suimu Toyoda, Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet, devised Operation Ago. The plan aimed to lure the U.S. Navy into a decisive confrontation near the Mariana Islands, where Japan would deploy its first mobile fleet, backed by hundreds of land-based aircraft and carrier-based planes. The goal was to destroy the American fleet before it could launch an attack. However, Japan's ability to gather intelligence had deteriorated. American air superiority controlled the skies, and advanced encryption had rendered Japanese radio interceptions ineffective. Desperate for information, Toyoda turned to submarines, one of his last remaining tools. 7 Row-class submarines were ordered to fan out across a 200-mile expanse of ocean between New Guinea and the Caroline Islands. This formation, known as the NA Line, was intended to act as a surveillance network. If they detected a U.S. task force, Toyota would spring his trap. What the Admiral didn't know was that the Americans had already intercepted communications revealing the location of the submarines. At Pearl Harbor, analysts at the Fleet Radio Unit Pacific had cracked key messages exposing the enemy deployment. The U.S. wasted no time. From Purvis Bay, Escort Division 39 was dispatched. It consisted of 3 Buckley-class destroyer, George, USS Raby, and USS England. The last named in honor of the young sailor who had died on the USS Oklahoma. The Buckley class was a fleet of more than 100 destroyers built rapidly between 1943 and 1944 to meet the war's demands. Initially designed to protect convoys, these ships became feared for their deadly efficiency in hunting submarines. They were longer, faster, and tougher than previous designs. Equipped with advanced sonar and radar, multiple anti-aircraft batteries, and triple-mounted 3-inch guns. But perhaps the most feared weapon on board was the Hedgehog. Originally developed by the British, the Hedgehog was a forward-firing spigot mortar that launched 24 explosive projectiles in a tight pattern. Unlike depth charges, which detonated at preset depths and often missed, Hedgehogs only exploded upon direct contact. This allowed the attacking ship to maintain sonar lock and strike with precision. Traditional depth charge attacks forced a ship to pass over the target, losing sonar contact just before firing. The Hedgehog changed everything. Ships could fire while still tracking the submarine, leaving the enemy almost no time to maneuver or escape. Each projectile carried 35 pounds of torpex, a compound significantly more powerful than TNT. A direct hit could tear through a submarine's hull and send it to the bottom within seconds. The first target for Escort Division 39 was not part of the Roe-class network, but rather the I-16, a larger Type C-1 submarine with a wartime record. It had taken part in the Pearl Harbor attack, launching one of the miniature submarines used in the raid. Now, it was on a mission to deliver supplies to Japanese troops in Buin, Papua New Guinea. Before it could complete the delivery, an Allied patrol aircraft spotted it north of Bougainville and relayed the location to the destroyer group. The ships quickly mobilized, forming a wide sweeping line 4,000 yards apart as they moved toward their target. On May 19th, the USS England made the first sonar contact. The Japanese submarine began evasive maneuvers, swinging side to side underwater to scramble sonar readings and avoid attacks. USS England pursued relentlessly, surging forward and staying close. Each time she moved in for a strike, I-16 twisted away and disappeared from sonar range, forcing the Americans to reposition. Commander Walton B. Pendleton gave the order to fire. Hedgehog mortar launched but missed their target. 2 more salvos followed, one of them hit. Still, the I-16 continued to fight. A 4th attack missed, and it seemed the sub might escape. Just after 2:30 p.m., sonar picked up I-16 again. Commander Pendleton gave the command to fire. Moments later, a violent explosion lifted England's rear end out of the water, slamming sailors onto the deck. For a few seconds, the crew feared they had been torpedoed. But then oil surfaced, followed by debris, fragments of furniture, twisted metal, and the last of the I-16's cargo. The sub was gone. England had claimed her first kill, making it clear to every Japanese submarine in the area that they were being hunted. As Escort Division 39 hunted I-16, another battle was underway nearby. Overhead, U.S. Navy bombers had located and destroyed Roe 117. Still, Admiral William F. Halsey of the U.S. Third Fleet wasn't convinced the sub had been alone. Intercepted Japanese messages confirmed Toyota had deployed more submarines across the region. Halsey ordered a sweep of the waters surrounding the site where Roe 117 had been sunk. The Roe 100 class, known officially as KO-type coastal submarines, were smaller than fleet subs, but just as deadly. Built for ambush and defense, they were agile and stealthy, capable of surface speeds over 14 knots, and submerged speeds up to 8 knots. The submarines relied on their 21-inch torpedo tubes to strike quickly and then vanish into the depths before their targets could retaliate. As the USS England, USS George, and USS Raby moved through the waters west of Manus Island, they faced the constant threat of the KO-type submarines' brutal hit-and-run tactics. After sunset, visibility dropped to nothing. The sea became an expanse of darkness, and radar was their only chance of spotting hidden enemies. Even in such perilous conditions, Commander Pendleton and his men pressed on. The search was tense. But just before dawn on May 22nd, a surge of excitement swept through the bridge of the USS George. At 3:50 a.m., radar picked up a faint contact, an enemy submarine cruising at the edge of range. England was ordered to hold position to create a containment arc, while George and Raby surged forward to intercept. As they neared the last known coordinates, George swept the area with a searchlight, cutting through the blackness, and then they saw it. Row 106, one of Toyota's Sentinels, caught in the beam just as it started to dive. George launched the first volley of Hedgehog mortar, but they disappeared into the sea without detonating. The submarine had slipped away. 10 minutes later, England reacquired sonar contact. Pendleton immediately ordered another salvo. Again, no explosions followed. Row 106, instead of fleeing, turned back, perhaps to confuse its pursuers or perhaps to ready its own attack. This maneuver gave England a clear shot. The destroyer fired, and moments later, 3 explosions thundered through the sea. As England crept closer, a dark oil slick spread over the water. The submarine was gone. The exact end of Row 106 remains uncertain. Some believe the damage forced the crew to scuttle their sub to avoid capture. In just 3 days, England had destroyed 2 enemy submarines. The day after Row 106 was eliminated, the hunt pushed deeper into the NA line. On May 23, under thick clouds and low visibility, the destroyers were once again forced to rely solely on radar and aircraft patrols. One patrol plane spotted Row 100 for surfacing 250 nautical miles north of Kavieng, New Ireland. At 6:10 a.m., radar on the USS Raby picked up the contact just 4 miles away. The ships accelerated to intercept, but the submarine dived before they could strike. Raby was first to engage, launching a spread of hedgehogs, but they missed. As she prepared for another run, Row 104 countered with sonar jamming pulses to confuse targeting. Once again, it fell to the USS England. Her first salvo failed to hit, but the second found its mark. Multiple contact-fused mortars slammed into Row 104's hull. Explosions rippled beneath the waves, followed by the groan of a submarine being torn apart. To ensure the kill, England dropped 13 depth charges. Hours later, debris surfaced, proof that the submarine had been destroyed. The momentum continued. On the night of May 24th, sonar contact came from USS George. Row 16 was detected. Just 7 miles away, the submarine tried to evade, but England was already closing in. Her sonar crew pinpointed the position, and hedgehogs launched. Again, no explosion. The destroyers searched through the night. As dawn broke, an oil slick and debris began to appear. Row 116 had been mortally wounded but had managed to flee before finally succumbing. A month later, the Japanese Navy confirmed the submarine and its crew were lost. England now had 4 kills, but she was low on fuel and nearly out of hedgehogs. The crew set course for Manus Island to resupply. Only 100 nautical miles from their destination, radar operators on Raby and England detected another contact, Rowan 08. Despite being low on energy, ammo, and with exhausted crews, Pendleton made the call to engage. The USS Raby led the charge, unleashing one of her last hedgehog salvos in a precise arc. But Row 108 dodged the blasts. Then it was England's turn. Pendleton ordered fire, and hedgehogs flew once again. This time, they struck true. A series of underwater detonations confirmed the hit. The following morning, the destroyers arrived at Manus Island, where they rearmed and refueled, preparing for the final stage of their mission. Reinforcements soon arrived in the form of a second hunter-killer group, led by the escort carrier Hoggett Bay, accompanied by destroyers USS Hazelwood and USS McCord, and the escort USS Spangler. Meanwhile, Japanese command had issued warnings to every submarine in the region, telling them to avoid contact with American forces. Most submarines obeyed, diving deep and slipping away. But Row 105 stayed behind. Whether the crew never received the order or chose to disobey, the result was the same: they remained in hostile waters. risking their lives. In the early hours of May 30th, USS Hazelwood made contact with Row 105 and quickly deployed depth charges, trying to destroy the submarine. Before it could submerge, the attack failed. Row 105 fought back by releasing oil and debris to fake her destruction. She used sharp, evasive maneuvers, slipping just beyond sonar detection. For hours, USS George and USS Raby circled and attacked, launching 16 combined Hedgehog and depth charge barrages, all missed. At one point, Row 105 surfaced directly between George and Raby, making it impossible for them to fire without risking each other. Time was running out. Reports came that Japanese aircraft were en route. If the Americans stayed too long, they would become targets themselves. Orders were given to retreat, but Pendleton had not yet taken his shot. He radioed Commander Hamilton Haynes aboard USS George, requesting a final chance to strike. Nearly 30 hours after the first contact with RO 105, USS England made her approach. The submarine tried to maneuver, but the destroyer closed in. Hedgehogs launched. Explosions followed. 2 charges detonated, shaking the deck and sending sailors stumbling. As the sea calmed, it became clear Row 105 had been destroyed. England had done the impossible. 6 enemy submarines sunk in just 12 days. Commander Haynes radioed Pendleton, asking, "God damn it, how do you do it?" By now, Escort Division 39 had broken the backbone of Admiral Toyoda's NA line, sinking 5 of the 7 submarines originally assigned to the surveillance network. For 2 more weeks, they scoured the Pacific in search of any remaining subs, unaware that the formation had already collapsed. Row 109 and Row 112, the last survivors, had fled after finally receiving official warnings. The effort to resist the Americans in those waters had proven futile, with their submarine screen completely destroyed. The Imperial Japanese Navy was left effectively blind, unable to monitor US fleet movements or mount any kind of coordinated response. Deprived of reliable intelligence, Japan began missing resources, wasting precious fuel, and leaving critical island bases and ports exposed and underdefended. The ambitious vision of Operation Ago, Japan's plan to deliver a decisive blow against the advancing US Navy, had crumbled. June 1944 marked the devastating conclusion. The Battle of the Philippine Sea unfolded, and with no surveillance to support them, Japan's reconstructed carrier force walked into a disaster. Expecting to surprise the American fleet, they instead ran headlong into a defensive. While reinforced by radar-directed firepower and waves of skilled US pilots flying, the new Grumman F-6F helped. Within hours, more than 350 Japanese aircraft were destroyed. Many shot down before they could even reach the US ships. Japan's naval air power, once the terror of the Pacific and the force behind the attack on Pearl Harbor, was effectively wiped out. Aboard the ship that carried his name, Ensign John C. England was finally avenged. The moment carried a bittersweet weight. The USS England was awarded the Presidential Unit Citation and 10 battle stars for its extraordinary service. Lieutenant Commander Walton B. Pendleton, whose leadership had led to the destruction of 6 enemy submarines in under 2 weeks, received the Navy Cross. Shortly after the campaign, however, Pendleton was reassigned to a new Escort Division operating in Alaska for the rest of the war, and command of the USS England passed to Officer John Williamson. For the remainder of 1944, the ship shifted focus. Instead of submarine hunting, it took on convoy escort duties, playing a key role in establishing the network of forward bases that would support America's final offensive toward Japan's last strongholds in the Pacific. The USS England would not see major combat again until May 9, 1945. Off the coast of Okinawa, that day, 3 Japanese aircraft appeared without warning, diving toward the ship in a kamikaze attack. Williamson's crew reacted immediately. Gun crews rushed to their positions and opened fire, hitting one of the planes and setting it ablaze. American combat air patrols intercepted the other 2, shooting them down before they could reach their targets. But the flaming plane, still airborne, was not finished. The pilot, refusing to let go of the controls, directed the burning aircraft straight into the starboard side of the USS England. It struck just below the bridge, and the onboard bomb detonated on impact. The explosion claimed the lives of 37 crew members and wounded another 25. The surviving crew battled the flames and ultimately saved the ship. But the damage was extensive. After temporary repairs, the USS England returned to the United States. She was scheduled for full restoration, but the war ended before the work could begin. With peace declared, and military budgets tightening, it was decided that the USS England would not return to sea. She was decommissioned on October 15, 1945. Just 2 years after her launch, in 1963, a new USS England was commissioned in her honor. This modern Leahy-class guided missile cruiser would go on to serve during the Vietnam War, and later in Operation Desert Storm. Still, the original USS England's campaign during May 1944 was a singular achievement. As historian W. and H. Holmes observed, her relentless and successful pursuit of enemy submarines remains the most brilliant anti-submarine operation in history.